Charlotte Flowe World Sports Show. Joining me on the show tonight is James Galanis. I want to thank you for joining me, James. How you been?
Thanks for having me. Good, Charlie. How you been?
Good. Just trying to – we always talk about as coaches reinventing the wheel. This is the first time in our careers we've got to reinvent the wheel.
No doubt, man. Gone down a different road than we've ever gone, for sure.
I think the interesting part of it, you take it with a grain of salt and the positivity of it, we're all in it together. You know, that there's things that you are learning that I'm learning every single day. And I look at the blessings in disguise that is shaping us as how we can use the tools we have to offer other opportunities for players.
Yeah, definitely. This whole Zoom thing has definitely changed things. Definitely allows us to communicate a lot better and a lot more efficiently, I think, because we're not meeting at places and we can knock over, the tactical stuff and the mental stuff. You can just do it online at the comfort of your own home. So definitely opened up our eyes in that way.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head that has really made me think and evaluate how I can do the night before a big game, because we, as youth coaches, and then me and you coach high-level players, we are limited in the number of hours we can work with players, and that's just a little bit of common sense that you can't overburden your players. But there's no reason we can't meet, the evening of a big match and just go over some tactical stuff. Like, me and you, you can do the screen shares and all these different, nifty ways that you can educate your players with time that they don't have to get in their car and drive a half an hour to the training.
Yeah, definitely. It's great.
So some big news came out recently that New Zealand and Australia will co-host the 2023 Women's World Cup. You must be over the moon and excited to see, your home country get this World Cup.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's great for Australia and New Zealand. They are like leaders in terms of, giving females the opportunity to express themselves and play. And in terms of equality, I remember growing up there as a kid. I never once felt that, there was some type of exclusion for girls participating in sports. If anything, it was completely equal. And I never witnessed it or felt that some type of equality even existed. So I think this has allowed Australia and New Zealand to steadily improve in sports in general. And if you look at like the Olympics and in other sports, they do really well. So having the World Cup be hosted by both of these countries, I think it's definitely a great reward for how they've conducted themselves over the years.
I think it's good that it came out this time, that the countries have 3 years to start doing their preparations and start creating that buzz and these opportunities. We see that, traditionally, host nations, do very well, and most times they make it to the knockout round. And I'm sure that that's, kind of in the back of the mind of the coaching staff in Australia and New Zealand, that, that we're going to create this country buzz, which is going to also create a lot of support and programs and development that you see that what it leads up to, and then even the aftermath of the positivities that it leaves aftermath.
Yeah, definitely. Just hosting it and it being all over the news and on social media and, the attention that it's going to draw is definitely going to lay down a solid foundation of new interest coming up with the young players. And it's going to just bring attention to the game in general, because in Australia, it's not like it's the most popular sport. It's actually battled really hard to gain credibility in Australia. So I think this event is definitely going to help in a lot of ways, like I said, in cultivating new players that are gaining interest in the sport and just making the sport a lot more popular to the general public. So I think it's going to be fantastic.
You mentioned about the popularity. Obviously, the big sports down in New Zealand and Australia is rugby, and then Aussie rules football. And it's a similarity thing here in the United States, where American football here in the Philadelphia area kind of trumps all. I think that's good that, we're getting to see, that there are secondary sports within countries that can be widely supported, and you can still have your other sport and support that just as well.
Yeah, definitely. Look, Australian soccer has been gaining popularity because of the World Cup. You know, there's no there's no real worldwide audience in terms of rugby or even cricket, or Australian rules football is only played by Australians. So, you know, in terms of, you know, the whole country sitting down and playing against the whole world, it happens at the World Cup. So it kind of has unified Australia in a lot of ways. Of course, you got the Olympics, but you know, it's a different feeling with the World Cup. And now this is going to be an opportunity for the whole country to unify behind the Matildas, which I think is just going to be amazing for everybody.
I think it's exciting. I mean, you have to look back on your calendars and look at the times. And we know that whenever the World Cup comes out, we always say, all right, this country or this nation is getting the World Cup. Okay, I got to watch games at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. That'll be our case here in the United States. But, you know, if you go back and visit your family, I think it's good for these countries like Australia and New Zealand. They're not having to watch the games at 2 a.m. They're going to be able to enjoy it in their prime time, middle of the afternoon, in the evening. So that's another really factor that you guys probably aren't used to, that supporting your women's teams in the World Cups.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we're used to waking up at you know, 3, 4 a.m. and watching games from all over the world. It still happens when there's games in Europe. Um, they're at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. But you know, one of the things in terms of time zone, I think this is going to be great for not only Australia but that whole Asian region as well, because it's going to be on a great timeline for them also. So I think it's going to raise awareness through not only Australia but that entire Asian Pacific area.
So it is early. It's about 3 years out. We don't know the exactly time of the year that the event will happen, because being that Australia, New Zealand are Southern Hemisphere, you know, we'll have to see how FIFA actually lines that up. You know, is that something you're thinking about going down and attending it yourself?
Yeah, I might. You know, we'll see what happens by then. But yeah, I mean, if I can, I'm going to go down and watch for sure.
Yeah, I just got reminded. I was like joking with our WPSL staff, like, yeah, we should go down there for a road trip. We should take the whole team. And they're like, well, coach, the World Cup's in the middle of WPSL season. I'm like, oh gosh, that's right. So I know that
Yeah,
we're going to have kind of a guinea pig tester in the next Men's World Cup in Qatar. That's going to take place in like a November, December, and I think that we've traditionally seen the World Cups being played in that, you know, June, July window, and I think that, you know, we've got the men to kind of experiment to see what a World Cup will look like in a November, December.
yeah, it's going to be different for sure. You know, I don't think it really matters. The only thing that's going to happen is we're going to have to break up the actual league calendar a little bit, so it's going to mess things up in that regard. But I think it's the right move. You know, they got to play in the winter. They can't play in 140 degrees
No,
weather. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a test. I agree with you.
now the thing that we love here in the United States, you know, us, that you and I that support the NWSL, sorry, and you know, you've worked with players that are playing that league, and then you work with players playing Australia. I think it's such a great way the, you know, Australian leagues and the U.S. leagues, their calendars, you know, are complete opposite. We see so many players that can really almost close to play year round, and I love that relationship, because I watch a lot of the Australian leagues, you know, to get my, you know, football fix in, women's football fix in during the winters, and I'm sure that that's, you know, really cool when you work with players that have that ability to play for both leagues.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a great way for the, you know, for the American players to be able to go over there and in the off season kind of keep their foot on the ball and get some games in, especially a lot of young and up and coming players. And it's great for the Australian players to be able to play in both leagues, which helps them, you know, make more money playing in two leagues. But I don't know if you know, Charlie, but what's happened is the Australian men's league, at least, has just changed, and it's going to be same calendar as European soccer. So I'm not sure what that's going to do to the women's game. It might change, but it's definitely been a great thing for the women that are playing to be able to play in both leagues.
Now that actually is news to me, because we hear that here in the United States a lot, that the MLS league is the North American league with the USA and Canada, and even we do have the Mexican leagues that have their kind of different, they're not necessarily a FIFA calendar. And that is always a debate, that you have to put in so many different factors of weather and geographic location. But it is true, if you really want to be on that FIFA calendar, it makes it that advantage of how you can work with other clubs, like other international clubs.
Yeah, I mean, I think FIFA in general, they need to review the way they're doing things and make it where all the international breaks are aligned and the workload from the players is reviewed, because I think it's a lot. And also, how do we include the women to be a part of the men's calendar and make them a part of the men's game? I think that's the final piece that's missing. I'd love to see eventually every top club, and including over here MLS club, and even youth clubs, they all have a women's team and they all have a men's team, where they have both, where they're not separated, where it's a different entity, kind of how Sky Blue is in for us. They're kind of on their own. It'd be better if they were Red Bull. The Union should have a team. I think every club around the world should have a women's team and help them grow and help the women grow. Because for me, the biggest thing that I see is what do the sports that these females and males play, what does it really give us at the end of the day? We don't all go on and become superstars, but it gives us some strong values and character skills that helps us carry on through life and helps us become successful. So people talk about the women's game and growing it. Yeah, I agree with that, but I think we missed the boat of all over the world of giving the females the opportunity to play, to give them the opportunity to learn from the life skills that we can extract from sport.
No, I think that, like you said about clubs, having partnerships versus actually having a women's program, and you look at the NWSL as a good microcosm of how you can look at it, that there are like a Portland, and Houston, they have two teams, and then you have where you have like Chicago and Sky Blue that kind of have indirect partnerships with their MLS clubs. So it's definitely been a topic of debate, because people come to me with my WSL team and say, well, why don't you guys play at the Union Stadium? And it's like, well, unless we have a true partnership, we can't afford to train and play there. And I think that's the biggest thing, is people don't really think the whole cost of us renting a stadium that holds 20,000 versus we play in a stadium that holds 5,000. So it really comes down to the cost. And you have to look at, are you training at an MLS facility? Are you an actual partner? Or are you paying rent to train there? So that's the whole factor that people, I guess, don't really think through a lot, and it is a make and break as a club. If I've got great facilities and I've got a good ownership, I'm going to attract certain players. But if I'm working with a budget as a coach, it's hard for me to attract certain players because I'm at the mercy of what my ownership provides me.
Agreed.
So what have you been working on now personally? You're doing some ODP work and you've got your Universal Soccer Academy. Just want to update the public on the projects and stuff that you're doing now, work.
Yeah, still doing the same thing, working at Universal Soccer Academy, doing well there. We just opened up a new facility, so that's exciting. I continue to be technical director of Medford Strikers, small but prestigious club, absolute fantastic environment to work in a club like that. And I'm also the ODP technical director, and that's going really well. I've been able to implement some changes that I think has improved the program. Just focusing on those three things, that's enough. It keeps me busy, keeps me stimulated. It definitely challenges me. So I'm loving life, man, between those three things.
Yeah, it's interesting. You remind me of me a lot because, I think it's every day of the week I'm wearing a different hat and we have so many different roles. But I mean, honestly, I love it to death. I love the fact that There's places where I'm an assistant coach. I may be a goalkeeper coach. I may have a director type of role. So I think it's a neat thing that I encourage a lot of parents and kids to dig into. There's so many different things you can do within the soccer world, not just be a coach.
Yeah, you definitely got the passion, Charlie. You love it, and you're all over the place, and you're doing well, and you're improving. It sounds like, and well done. Proud of you, man.
But we also have the other jobs that that we're parents too. I mean, it's I think being a parent teaches you a lot about coaching, and I'm a former teacher too. So there's a lot of these lessons you take from being a parent.
Yeah, you're a young parent, so you got great days ahead. And my kids are now teenagers, and I'm loving it. But you've got a little one, right?
Yeah, she's about a year and a half. So it's just that starting to understand.
Days ahead, Charlie. Good days ahead, man.
Oh, great days ahead. She knows that when I put the television on, she knows it's soccer. So she already knows that when Daddy hits the remote, 9 times out of 10, she's putting soccer. I'm putting soccer on television, and she's kind of embraced it, So, but I mean, you're doing a wonderful job with your kids, and it's great seeing their success. Watching them in front of my eyes grow up, and them. I just can't imagine the feeling as a parent seeing your kid on a field. It's a lot like being a coach. Go through something you've taught them and just sit back and watch.
Yeah, definitely. It's been challenging to coach them, but it's definitely a rewarding experience. And I kind of stay away a little bit. I coach them, but at home I don't talk to them about the game at all. We kind of keep that separate. And like you're saying with the hats, I walk out on the field and I'm Coach Galanis, and when I walk in the house or we jump in the car, I'm Daddy Galanis, a totally different person. So I've done a good job, I think, of separating it, and I think that's helped in my kids growing a love for the game and not feeling pressure and just enjoying the journey.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that about the different hats, and that's something that we talk about a lot as coaches, and me and you've talked about off the record about just how a parent is at a game, that when you go to a game and watch your child, that it's a little different for you because you're a coach, but I've heard so many stories of coaches when they watch their kids. Sometimes they're the calmest because we're letting the coaches do their job. And like you said, when the kids get into the car, you're their dad. And we talk about this a lot in coaching meetings and sessions, that when kids get done with their game, just be a parent, just be supportive of their kid, because they got to live with you,
That's it. That's what you got to do. You got to let go and just leave it alone once you get in the car. That's it.
Now, you've brought up about how this whole connecting people virtually has been great for the mental game. I mean, you have players all over the world that you work with that they'll play for their domestic team, play for their countries. So you're very limited in when you can actually physically train them, So obviously that's been a big factor for you. I've heard from a lot of players you've worked with that, keeping in contact on maybe it's game day or training, just keeping their heads in the game.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of the mentorship thing. I think that's the biggest part, especially for these high-level athletes that I work with. When they come and see me, I'm obviously tweaking them and tweaking their game and just making them more efficient with the ball. But most of the work is actually psychological. So, when they're in competition, things happen. Everything from training could start off training and you're not in the starting 11, you're in the second 11, and for a young player or a player that's used to playing every minute of every game, that can derail you. And it's my job to make them focus and stick to the job and just worry about what you can control. Or comes time for the 11 and the coach picks the 11 and you're not in it. There's another obstacle, or you come off, at halftime. There's another psychological obstacle, or there's decisions in the team itself. Bad chemistry between a team. There's decisions right there. So the whole psychological and mentoring piece. I think it's the biggest piece. Especially at the highest level. So I've been lucky enough to be able to do that for the last 20 years. And it's definitely draining because you're kind of thinking for the player and you're basically taken them off the ledge most of the times.
No, you hit the nail on the head, because me and you, because I'm a trainer also and you're a trainer, but we're also coaches too. So it does help that we work on both sides. And trust me, on game day, those decisions are not easy. When you're consulting with your coaching staff about your 11 and your 18, that it is something that, every player's got to know, that we don't do it with like just no thought at all. It's a very tough job to put out the best 11 that you think are the best 11 and then make those subs. And I do hate the thing when people look back, oh, in retrospect, I made a mistake. But at the time, if that formation would have worked out and you would have won, then you would have been a genius. So that's the part of coaching that becomes very, you're talking like an inch or two. You have some of the best players in the world you work with. It may not be in the starting lineup because one player beat him or her just one step or one move they could have made at a training that made that coach say, oh, I think he or she should be a starter tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Everything you just said is dead on. As a coach, you've got to make the decisions, and you're going to pick 11. And if you've got a 20-man squad, that's 9 people on the bench that you've got to kind of manage and try to explain to them why you made that decision. And I think the biggest thing is making the players see that you're a good person at heart and you're just doing what you think is right for the team, and that it's nothing personal. And then on the other side, as a mentor, when that happens, you've got to also try to coach the player through the process without them turning their back on their coach and without them having an attitude towards their coach, and by them still supporting their team and smiling. And deep down, you might be boiling and you might be saying, I'm going to prove the coach wrong. But, being able to not show any of that emotion is a key part.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I'm in my 40s. You're only a couple years older than me. And our brains are a different level than we were when we were 22, 23. It would be very hard for me to convince my 18, 19-year-old self that me not starting is my best interest. And I didn't get it. And that probably is the hardest thing, I think, as a coach now, as we mature just as people, to have a conversation with somebody that is half of our age that might not realize the whole big picture of things. And like you said about how they react, and it's true, because us coaches, we're not necessarily judging, but we're watching everything you say and do. And it's like this bank of saves of how you handle adversity is so big. I mean, you could have a player and say, hey, listen, I didn't get to play today. I know you worked hard, but we'll do our best. You keep working. And some players, don't like it. Some are like, that's fine, coach. I get it, So it's something that is tough. There's not necessarily a manual on it for every single individual, how they handle it.
Yeah, that's why managing your emotions is a key part, and it's something that needs to be taught at a young age, Charlie. And this is the problem with youth development, that we all, not we all, but a lot of coaches, or most of the coaches, focus on technical, tactical, and physical training, and they don't really deal with the psychological part. This game is full of emotions, and your emotional skills are going to be tested on a weekly basis. And if you don't know how to manage your emotions, you're going to be in trouble. So this isn't something that you should be dealing with or experiencing when you are 18, 19, like you mentioned. This is something that you can start to learn and cultivate from as young as 10 years old, by simply self-evaluating and learning how to handle and manage your emotions. So that's a big piece.
Yeah, the mental part is big, how you handle adversity. One thing I try to do, within the bounds of my control, of teams, because every club, whether you're coaching college, pro, you have a limited number of hours with their players, I mean, there's one thing I really try to do with my WPSL team is try to do team bonding type things. We had some couple watch parties for the USA games last summer, and even just doing a night where maybe you all get together for dinner. And I think that's probably something that goes back to your mind when you're coaching the Atlanta Beat, that you have really high profile players that are at the top of their game, but you still want them to have some type of friendships and bonds off the field, because when it comes time for somebody to get picked, they're going to support their friend, on the field a little bit more than a teammate. So it's kind of that friendship teammate that you're forming with your players.
Yeah, definitely. The whole management of the team is something that you've got to have your finger on. You've got to know exactly what's going on in terms of how the team is gelling, how they're treating each other. Is there respect there? Is there unity there? That's a very, very big part of the game.
So your ODP work, what is your day-to-day task in that? Because that's, something that I've got some players that I club coach that play ODP, and, that's, it's a different type of job. A lot of parents don't know exactly what ODP really is.
Yeah, so ODP is basically a pipeline to being selected state team, then your regional team, and then national team. And you have a tryout in your own state, you get selected, you represent your state, you play against other states in regionalized tournaments, and then from there you get selected to go into like a regional camp where regional coaches are there. You get to the camp. If you do well, then you get selected to like a national training center. And at the national training centers, there is identification to the youth national teams that goes on. So it's basically a pipeline. I'm the director of it here in New Jersey, so I'm in charge of the entire program, selecting the players, the training program, the actual coaching curriculum, the playing style that we play, just everything top to bottom. So it's definitely a big task, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, you said big task. We've known that the state of New Jersey has been a hotbed for pumping out, not just national players, but some of the best players in the world. Like I'm sure that there's that pressure, to maintain that. What's that been like to say, hey, I'm taking over and working with a state that is known to just produce national team players?
Yeah, look, with the ODP program, we don't have them for a long enough time to really impact them. I mean, we can
Gotcha.
improve them and sharpen them up and give them that environment to be able to play with other top players from around the state and to play with other top players from other states. But really, in terms of the players that each state is pumping out, it's really a reflection of the clubs and the clubs' success in terms of how they're developing players. So we can only be as good as what our cattle is.
Yeah.
If our clubs are doing good, then the state program is doing good. So in terms of New Jersey, yeah, we're a hotbed. Definitely, I think probably the most successful state in the country historically, and we see a ton of fabulous kids that are coming through the ODP program, and it's an absolute pleasure to work with them.
No, I think you said it best there, and it's true that we see these players that do so well for our country, whether it's male or female. You got like a Christian Pulisic who's playing now for Chelsea, one of the bigger clubs in the world, played at Dortmund, did well. And then there's always that point back that, he grew up in Hershey, Pennsylvania, whether there is or isn't going to be financial support, type thing, or reimbursement, or not even reimbursement, kind of a reward for, hey, this club helped develop this player. And that's a big thing that we see. We're so used to, and I'm guilty of it too, that we see the state of New Jersey as a whole. And then we label ODP, okay, it's a whole, but you hit the nail on the head. It's the clubs. It's the small feeder clubs that are a small township or a small little city. They might only have a few hundred players, but something their coaching staff and their players are doing is helping push those players to that next level. And we don't see that much because I'm guilty of it. I can't name all the youth clubs of like, Tobin Heath or, Heather O'Reilly, Carly Lloyd, all these players that came out of New Jersey is, you really need to focus on, okay, where did she grow up playing? Who was her coach? And what were those things they're working with? Because that's what we really need to, I think, focus on is the grassroots part of what helped these players get to that level.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the grassroots game has definitely got to be revamped. It's not as strong as what it was. I think another key factor is that, kids don't play on the street like the kids of yesteryear. I think that's playing a part as well. So there's a lot of work to do, but in general, I think the game is a lot more structured today. But I think it's gotten too structured, where a bit of the freedom to express yourself has kind of gone, and that's put the brakes on a little bit in terms of the quality players that we are producing. Hey, Charlie, I got to run, man.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time, James. We'll definitely keep touching. I support everything you're doing and just love watching your boys grow up and go to the next level. Hopefully we'll be kicking back in stadiums watching our kids play at the next level together one day.
That's it, man.
Flowe World Sports Show. Joining him on the show tonight is Sam Lofton. Sam, thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming on the World Sports Show. How you been?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've been good. Trying to get through quarantine life best I can, just like everyone else. But it's been an interesting time and a lot more free time to work on my growth. So that's been nice.
So this is a day and age that, that a lot of us coaches and players and a person like you that's kind of playing and coaching kind of a mix, that we have a lot of time to think and reflect and who we are. And, we and you started chatting a couple weeks ago about a new business you started back in 2019 called Meditation by Sam. And I mean, this is something that is just across the board good for athletes and just an everyday person to just kind of focus on the controllables and not controllables.
Yeah, you're right. That's such a great way to say it. It's just sometimes meditation is actually so broad and so helpful that I have a hard time defining it. So, when I always talk about it, I always like to ask the person, like, what's something that you think you would benefit from working on it with your mentality? And then I kind of try to help them see how it could help them, because it is just such a broad, encompassing tool. And it really just about taking control of your own mindset and, using it to serve you instead of hinder you.
Yeah. I mean, meditation focus is a very, very key part of all sports. Soccer is a free-flowing sport, but we do see that there are several times in the game where there is the freezing and stopping, and you have that moment to just catch your breath and just gather your thoughts. I mean, my first thought is like a free kick, that you're over the ball and you have that small second. I mean, we think of meditation, you're in a quiet space and you're with, either your peers or teammates or other students, but just the smallest couple seconds. I'm sure there's things that you work with athletes, just that 5 seconds, even 10 seconds they have to just kind of do their thing.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. I kind of look at meditation from two sides, and one is like the pregame preparation. We can do things with meditation that help us build our confidence, reduce our performance anxiety, all these different things, and actually work on mentally preparing ourselves for what's to come, in sports, in life, in literally anything. But then there is like in that moment. And the really cool thing about meditation is that the results you gain from it, you see them in the fine moments where you probably don't have the time to think. So one analogy I like to use, especially like with my soccer players, is, when a cross is coming in, and like 9 times out of 10, if you try to think about where you're going to place the ball, you end up missing it, because you end up being like, oh, maybe I should put it there instead. And you end up completely missing it. And my athletes can always relate to that. But, like for me, every goal that I scored in college, I didn't score a lot of goals in college. I was a defender, but I can remember like every goal I scored, I didn't think in that moment. I just trusted my instincts and let myself play. And that's one of the great things about meditation, is it can calm your conscious mind that's always overthinking. It can quiet that voice and let your body do what it's trained to do. And also what you said, like in those small moments, like a free kick, a penalty kick, anything, like you can take like 1 second, close your eyes, take a deep breath. We've seen like LeBron James do it in the NBA finals. Like he took that time to just close his eyes for a few seconds and deep breathe. And just by doing that, you instantly transform how your brain is working in that moment. And your focus is way better. And actually one of like a really cool success story I've had with one of my clients, she's 12 years old, and her trainer was trying to make her hit the top of the net. And she kept missing. She kept hitting it in the goal. And she said she stopped for a second, closed her eyes, and took a few deep breaths. and just like quickly saw herself doing it correctly. And the next time she did it, she hit the top of the net. And so it's just like something that you can do beforehand to prepare, but also, yeah, in that moment when you are frustrated, stressed, overworked, you can take like 3 seconds to center yourself, and it makes the world of difference.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of us, know what meditation is, but I think we don't know what meditation is. So I mean, this is, I think, a good platform where you can actually just break down just what the definition of what is meditation.
Yeah, great question. And I toy around with how to answer this question, to be completely honest, because a lot of times it's different for everyone. But really, the overall goal of meditation is not to turn off your thoughts. Some people get confused about that. That is impossible to do. But the goal of it is to use your thoughts in a way that serve you. It's to center yourself, to be in the moment, and just to kind of come to like a more quiet place. And I like to talk about it as like speaking to your subconscious level. We have the conscious mind, we've got the subconscious mind. And with meditation, we can kind of quiet that conscious mind that's always thinking about everything we've got going on. And we can really talk to that deeper level, which is where a lot of our, negative self-beliefs are held. So that's really, really the overall goal. And, some of the reasons that it can help, it's the conscious mind, like we're in right now, it speaks in words. We're here communicating using our words. But that's not how our subconscious mind communicates. Our subconscious mind communicates more in like images and emotions. And that's exactly what meditation is. Meditation is using images, your senses, your emotions, and kind of going through this almost like a movie of what you want. And that's kind of why it's so hard to describe what it is, because you are not in your conscious mind, which is like me using words right now is trying to describe my subconscious by using my conscious mind. So that's actually why it gets a little tricky to describe. But a lot of our, our negative beliefs are rooted deep in our subconscious mind. And just by, using conscious words and thought is not enough to reverse those beliefs.
No, and I'll be honest with you, just the basic ignorance of not understanding exactly what meditation is. Like when you said about just turn your brain off, I hear that all the time. And I've got a scattered brain. I'm a coach. I'm constantly thinking of all the moving pieces, and same thing as a player, you're thinking about 100 different scenarios. And then you hear these things, just shut your brain down and focus, just close it out. And basically you're asking the impossible, for someone like me. It's so hard for me to turn off all those things, but I think you hit the nail on the head that you have to like look at it as you're not turning your brain off. You're just almost refocusing.
Exactly. Like, and that kind of upsets me to hear, but it's so common. Like a lot of times people are like, I can't meditate. I can't turn my thoughts off. And I was like, I don't know who told you to turn your thoughts off. That's literally like asking your heart to stop beating. It doesn't happen.
Just hold your breath for 5 minutes. You'll be good.
Exactly. But what we can do with meditation, I'm actually, let me step back. I'm not going to try to speak for like, the Buddhist monks who can meditate for hours on hours. I'm not going to try to speak for them. I don't know what's going on inside their minds. I personally cannot do that. But it's just about, we still have thoughts, and it's the idea of recognizing them, and letting them go. Sometimes like meditation is goal oriented. So, if you're going into a meditation with the goal of, increasing your confidence, there's a few ways I do with my athletes, but you go in there and sometimes you might have a thought might come across that's like about your dinner. And the first thing I say is try your best to let it go and come back to like your breath, because just by doing that, by acknowledging that you have a thought that's not serving you and coming back to your breath, that right there is a thing called meta awareness, which is, being aware that your mind is wandering. And that in itself is like a form of meditation. And it helps just right there, that it helps increase so many things. So I always say to people, like, it's okay, especially when you start, you're going to have those thoughts creep in. But try your best. Like I sometimes say, like, imagine they're in a boat just floating past you. They are like, your thoughts are not you, they're outside of you. And you don't want to get angry at yourself. You just want to say, okay, I'm going to come back to my breath, start focusing on your breath. And that right there, there's so much improvement just right there.
I think the thoughts that are going through my head now as I'm listening to you and taking this all in, that it's a gradual process. It's a learning process. You don't just get there by, okay, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to get my focus. You do hear players say that to their coach all the time, and I'm guilty of saying to my players, hey, you need to get your head in the game. You need to focus. And it's not as easy as, okay, go out there and learn how to volley a ball on a free kick and hit upper 90. It's not that easy, I'm sure. And that's what making me think a lot, that it's just not that easy to just go tell a player, go fix your head.
Exactly. And that's such a great point. And, that brings me to the concept of neuroplasticity. So this is the concept of like our brains are constantly adapting to our environment, to what we're told, to what we see, everything around us. Our brains are forming new neural pathways. Our neurons are firing together, or they're forming new pathways throughout our brain. And this is how, this forms our thoughts, our actions, all of this. And so like you said, you can't just tell someone to go fix their mind or to go volley that ball. You have to train it. Just like you train our body, we have to train our minds. We have to train that neuroplasticity to rewire some things. When we're young, our subconscious is very open to being like manipulated and formed by our environment. So a lot of times youth athletes, from the age of like 5 to 9 or so, they experience something. For me personally, I played with my older sister who was light years faster than me. And a lot of times, and I was skilled because I was playing up the air, so I didn't want anyone to touch me. I would use my feet. And a lot of times coaches would say, oh, like Jen, she's so fast. And me being young and naive, that was enough for me to be like, oh, that must mean I'm slow because no one's telling me I'm fast, right? So I allowed this thought to enter my mind. And I dwelled on it enough that I formed a neural pathway, this self-belief down in my subconscious that I'm a slow player. When no one ever even told me that. That's how fragile this is. So no one even told me that, but I was convinced I was slow. And this belief began to manifest itself in my game. I wasn't consciously every day like, oh, I'm the slowest player here. But it was my belief. So it almost became like morally wrong for me to be like a fast player. And this manifested into, I would pass the ball and I would just stand because I was, I didn't think I could catch up. I would shy away from tackles because I was convinced I was just slow enough that I would never win the ball. And it actually manifested into me being a lazy player. And I know it now. I look back and I had a few coaches be like, you can't just pass and stand. But that's what I would do because my subconscious belief was that I was slow. So it didn't matter. And it wasn't until I got older and was able to recognize that that was a belief handed to me. And it didn't actually mean anything, that I could get rid of that belief. But the work and being able to do that, it wouldn't have mattered how many times someone told me I was lazy or told me I was actually fast. Just like you're saying, it doesn't matter if you go tell someone to go volley a ball. I could read books all day, like how to build confidence. Doesn't mean I'm going to become confident. There's actually two types of learning, and this is actually rooted in neuroscience. And what we're talking about right now is declarative learning. I could read a book and get all this self-help about how to be confident. And a lot of athletes, when you ask them, they know how to be confident. They know, don't compare yourself to your teammates. Don't dwell on your mistakes. Don't listen to your coach when they scream at you. But that doesn't mean that they know how to then be confident. You know what I'm saying?
It's like having an action plan. You can read a million books until you're actually on the field and the game's being played, or you're at practice and it's put into motion. Like, how do you get rid of stage fright, dude? I had all the stage fright in the world, growing up, and it's just it's everybody handles it differently, and you can come up with all the game plans. It's the same thing with you now getting into more of the coaching side. I can write a perfect plan on paper. I can map out the perfect formation. It's just the execution is the biggest thing. And the same thing, I'm sure, with just experiences. I mean, let's talk a little bit more about how you got into this and how the player you were and who you are as a person now obviously shaped, this new Sam Lofton that we're talking to.
Yeah. So, so when I originally met you, I had just been drafted by the Boston Breakers in 2015. So, I was making my way into the NWSL after playing collegiately. And up until then, I think this is probably a very common experience for any girl in the NWSL. Up until then, I was a solid player on every team I've been on. I was always a starter. I never got cut from a single team. I always made it to that next level, and I always excelled. That was my reality. And when I, first came into the NWSL, that was every girl's reality. And it was the first time that, I wasn't in the best 11, not even close. And, maybe I was, but my confidence took a hit so quickly that I don't even know. Today, I don't even know. But yeah, there was so much pressure, and like my job, like it was fun. Soccer was like for the first time my job, and it was just a whole different mindset. And the environment was nothing like I had experienced before. It was very, very tough. And my confidence just took a hit. I, for the first time, had performance anxiety. I was making silly mistakes. I didn't want the ball. I was afraid to have the ball. It was just so much, just kind of, I did not play like myself for the entire season. And actually in that first off season, I came across meditation, and, I did not know what I was doing when I first started it. I had no idea, but it felt right. It felt like something that had been missing from my mindset. And I kind of stuck with it, and I journaled a whole lot to start seeing my changes. And I'm so thankful that I did. And the next year I went on to play for the Portland Thorns, and, they are just a super talented team all around. And it was the first time in a year that I was on the field with these really talented girls and didn't question why I was there. I was just confident in who I was. I was at peace with what I could bring to the team. And I performed light years better than I did at Boston because of it. And, I kept up this meditation practice. I went and played overseas for 2.5 years, which is a whole other animal. I loved it, but I rarely heard English for the next 2.5 years, and I had to go play and be confident. And I was. And, in Iceland, my second year, it was hard because there was even less English in Iceland. And according to Instat, I was the best left back in the country my second year. So it was just really, I think, a tribute to all of the mental work I had done to kind of end my career on top like that.
No, I mean, you go from Boston, and then you go and play in Portland for a while, and you're in Portland. I mean, that city is like a microcosm of soccer in America, because we look at what the Thorns do in the women's program. You're recognized in the streets. Probably it's this thing that everybody knows who all the Thorn players are. They're packing in 18,000, 15,000 on a slow night, which blows my mind that I've never been in that kind of crowd except for like World Cup games and stuff like that. But just that atmosphere that you're performing at a higher level, your confidence there, and you've got thousands of people looking at you.
Yeah, it was incredible. And so my role on that team was, I played left back as a pro, and Megan Klingenberg was the left back, or still is left back, from Portland. And at the time she was on the U.S. national team. So I did not have the expectation of starting. So when she went to the Olympics, that's when I got to play. So I got to fill in, in that moment when the stars were gone, and people like myself could step up. And I was so excited. I was so ready. I remember playing in front of 19,000 fans. We beat Seattle, who we on paper had no business beating. It was just absolutely incredible. And yeah, I actually went, Adriana Franch, goalkeeper for Portland on the U.S. national team, is one of my really good friends now. And I just went to her wedding last December, and the bartender was like, "Hey, you were on the Portland Thorns." I was like, "Yes, yes, I was." The city is incredible. There's nothing like it in the world. Yeah.
Now, that's what I've heard a lot of my friends that have played over in Portland, even the coaching staff, that you guys could just be out getting a sandwich at a cafe, and somebody's like, "Oh, you play for the Portland Thorns," where, let's be honest, the women's game, outside of the top 5 or 6 stars on the national team, you guys just fly under the radar. Now, what was that like in Sweden and Iceland? Just the recognizable, because a lot of those are smaller town teams, and there's so much history in the European teams.
Yeah. So actually, Iceland specifically, I was on probably the most historic team in Iceland. They had the most championships, and they were notorious for not having foreigners. So I filled in at left back, and I was only the second foreigner they had in the club in the last 10 years.
No pressure.
No pressure. So yes, I would, people, I was recognized downtown a few times. It's not too hard to recognize someone who's tan and has curly hair when you're playing with a whole bunch of Icelandic girls. So yeah, it was fun. And it was, you know, what comes along with being the only foreigner in 10 years is that there is not much culture of speaking English. They all can speak English, but they're not used to doing it. So that was a big test. But I grew so much in myself and in my sport, like in my game, and in those 2 years, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Yeah.
Now, turning back in meditation, you know, that in the sports world of, especially playing professional, even when you played, you know, in the CAA for JMU, that there's a lot of alone time. There's a lot of time on buses, a lot of time on planes, you know, that you probably aren't doing as much sports traveling, but you're doing traveling for the Cleveland Ambassadors, you know, like, what do you do with that time, you know, from, I guess, when you were in, you know, the pro level, like, what are you doing with that time then, and then what are you doing now when you do these international travels with Cleveland, like that time when you're on a plane for hours?
Yeah, good question. I mean, in college it was always go go go. So any travel time I was studying. I mean, I studied pre-medicine and biology in college, so there was not a free second when I wasn't reading some book or crying over chemistry. But now but now it's really cool because now in my free time I work on building my business. To be honest, like, you know, it's not something I saw myself doing before, and it's not what I have my background in the slightest. But every day, you know, I learn something new, and I continue to try to grow. So yeah, I do a lot of traveling. I do a lot of you know, in my downtime, I'm listening to podcasts about the mind and meditation. I'm trying to think of how I can find my next team to talk to. Yeah, so it's cool because I'm kind of building towards myself, like I've always been, but like also towards my future and towards the idea that I aspire to continue to mentor youth athletes.
No, that's great. Just anybody listening to the interview now joining us, this is Charlie Flowe with Sam Lofton talking about meditation by Sam. You know, I'm sure that this time period that we're in, which is so kooky, that you've been able to connect with a lot of young players and coaches that and still have a very big impact in their life, because this is a time and day and age where we really need that meditation to calm us in situations like we're in.
Yeah, this is, you know, it was kind of rough for me in the beginning to try to capitalize on during this time. But then, you know, I kind of looked at it as this is the time that people need it the most. You know, there's a rise with kind of every type of, you know, depression, anxiety, suicide, everything is on the rise, and it's just absolutely devastating. So for an entire month, I gave away all my content for free. I've got some online courses. So the entire month of April, when we first went in lockdown, I gave it all away for free to anyone who saw my posts. So yeah, I've been really fortunate to be able to continue to work, you know, because I could do it all over Zoom. So I've been so fortunate to be able to reach people from around the country and work on these types of things. And it's been tough because the athletes don't have the opportunity to necessarily put their skills to the test in training. But it's still such a great time to do it because, like we said earlier, it does take a bit of time to begin to reform those neural pathways. And the feedback I've been getting from the kids and the parents has been just so inspiring. And I'm so lucky that I've gotten to do this.
You want to share with the people listening out there some of your information on your website and how to contact you, how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my website is just www.meditationbysam.com. My email address is just info@meditationbysam.com. I see teams over Zoom, and during this pandemic, I do not charge for that at all because I know a lot of clubs have been, their budgets have been frozen or whatnot. So yeah, it's, I give talks, I introduce myself and what meditation is and how it's beneficial to athletes. And it's my goal just to keep reaching people.
I'm sure you've reconnected with clubs or club players, or we've reconnected through all this. I'm sure that, you've had some really wonderful, good conversation with some really cool people.
Yeah, certainly. I've just gotten to talk to so many youth athletes, and they're all and coaches too, don't get me wrong, but these youth athletes just continue to impress me in the work they're willing to do. I feel like every year things are getting harder. Like getting recruited is harder. The pressure that's on these youth athletes, I feel like it's just building and building and building. And some of them are literally missing the most pivotal times of their high school careers right now because of this quarantine. And every single day I'm impressed by these kids and their ability and their motivation to try something like this. So yeah, it's been a gift.
No, it's really awesome what you're doing. It's inspirational. I'm glad we're able to chat about this, because it's a very just valuable thing just in general for athletes to have, because, you look at it is, the whole world's doing this together. A lot of my players on my WCL team was upset, and I'm upset too, because I don't get to coach. We're going to our second year, and hey, there was mathematical chance we could have met Cleveland Ambassadors in the playoffs, and it's just things that can't happen. But what can we do in the meantime to keep going forward? And a lot of kids and parents are stressed about tryouts. And I think it's one of those things where I tell them that we're not having tryouts, so don't stress. You're on the team. We're doing our best in a lot of our clubs that I coach with to try to find every kid a place. And honestly, I feel so much better ethically about myself, because I hate cutting players. I just hate not having space for a player. And that's a tough thing, because like you said, you were in a situation growing up where you never really got cut. And I'm on the other end where I was used to getting cut. It's like, oh, I made the team. You go back to the coach. You don't question the coach and say, I think he made a mistake, so I'm just gonna walk out here really quick before he realizes he put me on the team. Because it's the stress. Like, I mean, I've coached as young as U8, U9, and have these tryouts, and there's no reason a kid at 9 and 10 years old should be stressed about a trial. And the stress is put on by the coaches and the parents. The child would never create his own stress. So I'm a big, I just don't like tryouts. They make me feel dirty.
Yeah. And the stress is it's sad. It's so real these days. I've got kids like as young as like 11 and 12 who know exactly what I'm talking about when I say like anxiety dreams. They have anxiety dreams when they're like 11, and it just makes me so sad. And another thing I love about meditation is that like the work that you do with meditation never goes away.
Yeah.
Like when you do form that new neural pathway, like again, unless you go in there and revisit it and try to get rid of it, but like, why would you do that? Once you implant that, that new belief in that reduction of stress, that's with you for life. So like, me, I've been meditating for about 6 years now. And even if I stopped today, like I could measure my stress levels or my emotional reactions in 10 years, and they'd still be better than they were 6 years ago when I first started.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool.
No, I want to thank you for coming on World Sports Show. I appreciate everything you do, and just glad to see you're in a good place, and hopefully that our paths will cross again, because I definitely these are the kind of tools that I just want even more coaches, because this is making me think a lot as a coach that you've been focusing a lot on the players, but this is definitely something I think coaches need to focus on, because what we say, I could say to 18 players at one time, and that's 18 different people taking in what I say and how they're going to handle it does weigh on me, because I can't necessarily play every player on my roster every single game. So there might have been times you're on my team, I might not have played you, and I'd have to live with that. So
yeah, and I do I actually do have like an online course for non-athletes, because I don't want, like, when parents reach out to me and they're like, hey, I'm stressed too. It's like, well, I've got a resource for you. I just don't actively promote it as much. And another great thing is just that, like, when you do any type of meditation, you gain so many effects, even if it's not a specific meditation. So you don't have to meditate about like how to speak to your players to become a more empathetic coach. It like empathy and like emotional regulation is just something that comes from meditating, because your gray matter actually increases, and this is what's responsible for those types of things. So I tell people, like, sometimes they're like, I specifically want this result, and I'm like, well, here's the good thing. You could just do like a 5-minute gratitude meditation talking about things that you really love about your life, and then you'll grow that too.
Well, thank you for being on the show tonight, Sam. I really appreciate your time.